narrative is overlooked in most arena-style games, and usually only appears in an opening cinematic or lesser-played single-player mode, because having narrative within the game itself would counteract the continuousness of its playability. Team Fortress 2, on the other hand, doesn't have a single-player campaign, an opening cinematic or story elements within any of its gameplay, yet it has one of the most engaging and original narratives for an arena-based game. This is because the entire story happens outside the game, and is addressed to players in a way that's usually only addressed to the character of the game as you're watching their digital world unfold. Even from its release in 2007, there was a slight crack in the door between our reality and the game's world. This came in the form of a Sentry Gun manual, which is available as the game's manual on Steam. Created by Eric Kirchmar, this pastiche of 1960s instructional ephemera is an embellished truth of the features involved with building a sentry gun in-game. However, it doesn't serve as an actual manual, so its creation wasn't to inform the player of technical game dynamics, but to give them a piece of the world as if they've just enrolled in it. The Meet the videos, however, provided the platform for the game's story-based narrative, but were initially just promotional pieces like a viral campaign. You can see this by comparing the amount of characterization from the first video to the latest one. The first one being the Heavy is a very short characterization, whereas the latest video at this point in time, Meet the Spy, is more story-oriented, covering not only the nature of the spy but intertwining it with his interaction with the rest of the classes and their mothers. This increasing inclusion of story elements in the promotional videos coincided with the gradual inclusion of narrative within the game's updates. But where the videos told us the story, the updates included us in it, addressing us not as players of a game but as stakeholders and consumers of TF Industries, working in the same way as the Sentry Gun manual. Some of the later updates, starting with the Heavy in August 2008, included magazine-style advertisements to deliver the information about a new weapon, while staying in character to the early 20th century theme. The best example would be the Scouts Force of Nature poster, because of its resemblance to children's comic adverts from the 50s and 60s, like the Daisy Defender toy gun page. Looking back on a time when BB guns could be innocently marketed to children, the idea of irresponsible products being portrayed as safe and fun is something we recognise humorously as well as critically. The narrative within the Force of Nature poster displays how the world of Team Fortress plays with the more humorous references, as it tries to sell a weapon by describing its most exaggeratedly dangerous qualities in a positive way. Probably the most important piece of promotional material to the characterisation of Team Fortress 2 was the Jurati weapon update released in the Sniper vs Spy update in May 2009. The flyer itself is a parody of an old promotional comic, and was important because it was the first appearance of the character Saxton Hale, shown here as a burly sales mascot in order to parody the original concept. The general mentality of the original advertisement is aggressively persuasive and has a very egotistical attitude, in hope that it may inspire a naive reader to ascend to the figure's apparent level of greatness. Obviously, in order to do so, the character would have to look like the kind of guy their potential audience would want to aspire to, and the large muscular build has typically been that desired look men have promised from such products, even today. In addition to this, I refer back to JC Leyendecker, because although his work had a hand in the inspiration for the game's overall design, he also pioneered the kind of advertising that used the image of ideal manliness to sell products. But because of his homosexuality, Leyendecker's depictions displayed homoerotic overtones, which went unnoticed and were accepted as a portrayal of ultimate manliness. The Saxton Hale depiction satirised this idea, by not only adorning his character with a chiselled figure, but other icons of manliness such as his moustache, big rugged boots, and a slight air of closeted sexuality. His character put a face to the weapons delivery in the game's world, and because of his over-the-top characterisation, Saxton Hale is one of the biggest Team Fortress memes to never actually be included officially in the game. The platform for his role within the narrative developed from several pieces of comic-style artwork displaying his acts of superior manliness, which later evolved into a full comic during the War update in December 2009. Not only did the inclusion of a comic give us insight to the world behind the scenes and other characters' places within it, it introduced the War update as a plot point to the game's timeline rather than just another weapons drop. And at this point in TF2's story, the game and narrative started to feel more like they were connected as well as parallel, because players' interaction with the game altered the outcome of the story, which in turn affected the update. This, along with the characterisation of the iconic voice of the announcer and the backstory revealed in hidden links, has expanded on the tone of the actual gameplay, making it feel as if there's something bigger going on than just point counts, even though there probably isn't. But as entertaining as all this is, the Medic and Pyro update were taken by the community just as effectively as the following updates, without all the narrative and behind the scenes characters. So building on the world of Team Fortress 2 outside the actual game seems unnecessary. However, over the class releases, we haven't just got new weapons. Through the fake advertisements and character building ephemera outside the game, We've had all the entertainment, anticipation, satisfaction and disappointment that a story-based game has, without the story elements interfering with the gameplay. This has not only allowed Team Fortress 2 to maintain the replayable characteristics of its genre, whilst keeping things fresh and interesting, but has strengthened the connection between players within the game's cultural community through the development of its inside jokes. So we can establish that the game requires its narrative to maintain and keep its community growing. But what about the actual meaning behind it? When contemplating some of the examples I've discussed in this video, you could draw conclusions about messages of cutthroat consumerism, corporate irresponsibility and false advertising. But really, when you look back on early 20th century commercial design, the nostalgia of developing consumerist advertising is part of how we remember that era. So it's not so much an intentional statement, but a piece of the world the game's trying to recreate. Because narrative doesn't have to be deep to be meaningful, and a game doesn't have to be serious to be cultural.